Hello, everyone. We are back once again with another episode of the Young and Foolish podcast. And this week, it's pretty special because not only do we have our friend Lorenzo back with us, what do you have to say for yourself about last week?
Hey, man, sleep is super important. We've talked about it before on the podcast, but man, sleep is very important, critical.
Yeah.
That is
how's the blog post coming about those naps?
The blog post is coming along. Yeah, it's coming along.
All right. But yeah, not only do we have our friend Lorenzo back, we also have a very special guest with us this week. We're joined by our good friend Georgi. And why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? However you want to do it.
All right. Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Glad to have you.
My name's Georgi. What do you even? How do you guys usually introduce yourself? I don't know. I don't have much to say, I guess. Right now, I've been figuring stuff out, moving back and forth, working some odd jobs, and now I'm back in school, trying. Right now I'm taking a course for concept art and illustration for the entertainment industry, and seeing where that takes me.
Yeah, that is really cool. Yeah, we don't really introduce ourselves because we do this every week.
Yeah.
And even in the very beginning, I don't think we talk. I think it just from based on the topic, we kind of talk a little bit about any relevant background. But one of the reasons why we have Georgi on today is because there's a topic that I've been interested in talking about for quite a while now, and that is creativity. And as he just said, he is doing his program related to the artistic field, the entertainment field, and obviously the creative class even, we talk about middle class and all those. The creative class is what so much is shifting to nowadays, which I'm glad to see, to be honest. But yeah, why don't you start off by telling us a bit more about your background with art, maybe how you got interested in it, maybe what other stuff you've done in the past.
I guess for quite a lot of people, it's been the same. Used to draw a lot when I was little, just messing around, drawing whatever I want, and it kind of just went away, I guess, during I'd say high school. Once I got into high school, it started to become more. What am I? I unfortunately never even thought about like art being a job. So it was once you got into high school, it was like, okay, what am I gonna do? So you just kind of push that part away. So for from grade 8 to I'd say until grade 11, that I didn't draw at all. It was, I guess, here and there, but it kind of completely went away. And in grade 12, it came back, and I was like everyone, I guess everyone was just figuring out what are they going to do, and I thought maybe I should come back to it, and so I started trying to draw again, but it would always come back and fade away, come back. It was it didn't feel stable, I'd say. Okay. So it was really hard to decide to really completely put your foot in.
Yeah.
What was the question again? It was like just the start.
Yeah. No, I think you answered it well without even knowing what the question was. Well, Raymond, as we've talked about before, I think you said you've done art in the past as well.
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty similar to what Georgi said. It kind of comes and goes in waves. You kind of get motivated to do it, and then disappears, and then you kind of stop for a while, and then comes back. But yeah, I kind of stopped as high school started too. I don't know why. I guess maybe I didn't, as Georgie said, maybe I didn't see it as like a career path, or maybe I was, like pressured into going to something
Yeah.
else, like health sciences and stuff like that, right? So I guess I kind of stopped during then.
Yeah.
And then ever since I stopped, I kind of want to pick it up again. But, like a part of me is always like, oh man, all these years, like how are you going to catch up to what you could be? And that's what I think that's like a very dangerous mindset to have, especially trying to pick it up again. But
Yeah,
I mean, I think part of it for you guys is like you had other hobbies and other things going on in your life during high school as well. So even like when you didn't see it as a career, I think it was probably hard to just do it as a hobby regularly, right?
Yeah.
Like yeah, it really did just fade away. It was like there wasn't like a definitive moment where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna put it aside. It really did just fade away. You don't really remember why you stopped or when you really stopped. But I guess we never really did. Like it just you do small things, but it's never like a big commitment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know for me, I'm absolutely terrible in like drawing, painting, all that type of art. In terms of creativity, a lot of my medium, especially from I would say later years of elementary school onwards, has been with music. Either just playing guitar by myself and all that, or with jazz band playing the trombone. And there's, I would say I always enjoy singing, even though pretty trash. Not as trash as the actual drawing or painting and all that, but not very good still. But I would say a lot of my outlet for creativity in those days have been through music. Whereas now, I still play music, mostly guitar, and just kind of sing along and whatnot. I would say it has shifted more towards this type of content creation, whether it is through writing blog posts, through writing other things, a lot of writing, and obviously this type of podcasting, I guess, is its own thing. I wouldn't even categorize it as something else. I would just say, this is definitely one way to really express yourself, right? To generate ideas, to really think about different things and put it out there and articulate your thoughts and ideas and express yourself in that way. And also just producing it. One of the biggest things that I've come to realize in the past few years is that there's really a major part of me that wants to put things out there, to create, to produce, right? Rather than just consume, because I am interested in so many things and I spend a lot of time and just in general, I just consume a lot of different content in various mediums, not and information as well, because Lorenzo and we've talked about it in one of the episode, one part of one episode actually, and it wasn't quite related to the actual topic. It was a bit of a tangent, but we talked about how when you understand kind of the background, the context of these type of art and whatnot, you really gain a much greater appreciation for it, and you really see the beauty in it more, right? So for me, when I consume all these different content, all this art and all these things, I'm also consuming a lot of information on the background, on the history of all those things, because I'm interested in that as well, right? And with all that consumption, I more and more want to create and produce and share, my thoughts and create stuff on my own and that kind of thing. And I've actually written a blog post about this. I think it came out a couple of weeks ago or something like that. But I guess what I want to ask you guys is, I know, Georgie, now you're getting back into it with this program, and Lawrence, I don't know how much of artistic endeavors you've ever really gotten into, other than being a master triangle player back in.
Oh, man. Classic, man. Oh, my gosh. I know that, Georgie, you do know that story?
No, I don't think so.
No,
Yeah,
I don't think so.
why don't you
Oh,
tell
my
the
God.
story first and then I'll ask the question?
Yeah, so back in elementary school, I was not a big fan of band class, right? Not at all. I was so bad at band that I can't believe it to this day. I literally cheated I didn't even really cheat, but I just kind of like I can't. I've never half-assed anything in my life so hard ever. It was incredible. I never learned how to play the recorder. I never learned how to read notes, and it was mandatory, right? That was one of the things that got me. I wasn't there by choice. I was forced to be there. Okay. So literally, when we were doing recorders for like however many years, I just kind of like pretend to play. I wouldn't really blow through my recorder, and I got through that just fine, right? Like she called me out every now and then, but I don't think she had the energy to put enough effort into teach me. Which, to be honest, I don't think I would either. And then I think it was around grade 6. Yeah, I think it was grade 6 or something. We got our actual instruments that we were going to use for band. So instead of everyone just playing recorders, everyone would get their kind of like chosen instruments, assuming that there was enough spots in that instrument because, can't have the whole band be in drums. But they had people come in with like a bunch of instruments to come demo it from like the music shop or whatever. It's like, okay, here's the drums. Oh, here's the recorder or whatever. No, not the recorder, but other stuff. I forget. And there was one that was absent. It was the bells, right? It was the bells. I heard the name on bells. Okay, you know what? That sounds like a triangle. Hell yeah. Okay, that sounds easy. That sounds so easy. Yeah, sign me up for the bell. Yes, I couldn't read notes at all. I was like the worst kid you could possibly choose for this one because the shock and horror I got when they showed me this like xylophone looking thing. I was like, oh my god. I thought it was good. It was so bad. What I would do is I would get the mallets, right? Because you play with mallets. And like it looked like a piano layout, bro. I was like, this is impossible. There's no chance I'm gonna learn how to play this. I would tap the keys very lightly, and I would press the mallet down onto the key afterwards to muffle the sound even more. And I was just a random shit the whole time. Man, my mom has this one story, and I don't remember this really that much, but apparently one time at a school band concert or whatever, I forget how long, but I went really long with with all my music sheets upside down, and I just kept going because I didn't read that shit. It was in the concert, so like halfway through, motherfuckers see me flipping that shit over. Oh my god!
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, not a big fan of music. And
No.
I'm never good at drawing.
Yeah, so what I wanted to ask you guys was, do you guys also feel that urge to produce, to create? And if you do, what's kind of your creative outlet? Like, what's a medium?
I feel like for me right now, I don't feel like producing. That's only because if I'm going to produce something, I want it to... I don't know. I'm very kind of acutely aware of how much I don't know about like the current, I guess, frontiers of knowledge. I would suppose like there's so many. Like for example, if I'm going to produce anything, it'll probably be some sort of writing, like a book or a blog post or something, and it would be on a subject, right? A specific subset of something. It wouldn't be like art because. Well, no, it is technically an art, but it wouldn't be like, say, painting or something. When you're painting something, there are kind of like movements in paintings, and there are like general themes in painting that kind of define certain eras. But nowadays, you can paint whatever you want, really. It's not like there's just such a predominant style. It wasn't like back in the day where it's like, oh, you got to paint Baroque if you want to get work, or you got to paint like this if you want to get work. Now it's pretty neat because you can just paint whatever you want. I don't have the technical skills for that, and I don't currently have the time to develop that. So I don't know. Who knows? It would be really cool. I've tried, or I've looked at some YouTube videos. That's what I consider trying. But obviously it's not a really good effort. But as far as like writing goes, I feel like I don't want to write something that's redundant. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So it would have to. I gotta go learn about everything else first before I go about writing. And then to learn about that, you gotta look at it from like a historical context. So you gotta learn everything else. So you just gotta learn everything, man. That's kind of why I don't really have an urge to produce right now, but I could see myself doing it later on if I have like a bright idea.
Okay.
But yeah.
I think.
That's
Yeah,
my
what about
thoughts
you,
on it.
Raymond? What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see myself doing it right now, and I've thought about it before. But instead of like knowledgeable content, like academic content, I'd probably go for more like a video game aspect type of
Yo,
deal.
let's make a content house.
Be like, bro, yeah, maybe become just like a one of those typical YouTube or like Twitch
Okay. Yeah.
people.
Mhm.
But I guess like in my eyes, like I'm still not too sure.
Yeah.
Like I know for a fact I'm not good enough, like quote unquote good enough. Typically you see like professional players or like really like top tier players in whatever game that usually streams, and they get the most views, I guess. But you also have people who are just there to entertain.
Exactly.
And I kind of thought about going into that pathway or path, but then I also realized if I were to do it, it's gonna take a lot of my time, and it is something that that requires a lot of your time and effort, and I just don't know if I could do it right now.
Yeah.
So like maybe I don't know, we'll see. It's not something like I'm too seriously like considering. It's just something that's crossed my mind. I'm like, oh, I could do that. Like I want to try it, at least give it a shot, here and there. But I want to be able to give 100% of my effort in that one shot, rather than like doing a half-ass and kind of be like, oh, you know what, maybe it's not for me. Like meanwhile maybe it could be, you never know. So that's kind of my take on it. Other than that, like I want to put things out there, but at the same time I feel like it's just lack of motivation and not really knowing what I want to put out. It could be like I've always wanted to pick up drawing, or the violin again, right? And like maybe do it through that. But yeah, I guess it's just the motivation, the lack of, I'd say. That's really just been the wall, So yeah, not very creative lately, but we out here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right. Let's hear from you, Georgie. How you doing?
Yeah. I think I feel the exact same way about. We kind of just put it off because we know it's not going to be perfect, I guess. So you just kind of like I think the same way as well, but I feel like even if we don't know so much, it's like it might be better to just try it, I guess, because there's so much to learn from that. But I say that, but like it's like same thing for me as well. I with the coursework's going on as well. You have it's still fun, but it's like you're being told what to do, right? So it's not as creative. You need to put something in there to make it enjoyable for yourself. So then you're learning, and you have less time for your itch your creative side, I guess.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I have ideas. I just fantasize about them, and then never do them. So, a question for you, George: how do you you wrote a book, you've started this podcast, like you've done lots. Like, how do you just get in there, I guess?
I think for me, like, it's not something that I just go into right away as well. But at the same time, I understand that it's never going to be perfect and there's always more to learn. And at the same time, even when you know everything, there's still going to be different perspectives anyways, right? And for me, I think it was just, okay, at some point I know I want to do this. I just have to make sure that the next period of time that I actually have some free time to put into this, I'm going to be ready to actually just get it started. So for the podcast, right when the summer began, like literally first day of May, I was like, okay, let's make this channel. Let's figure out which platform we're going to use to do the recording and how we're going to put everything on all the different platforms, how we're going to do the video version on YouTube, how do I edit stuff. So just learning all the skills I need to get it started. And from there, continue to learn, continue to improve on various aspects, right? So I think a lot of it is really just starting and just taking the step, right? So if you have an idea, you don't want to do it, so you just put in some preparation, and next time you have a slightly larger chunk of time you can actually dedicate to it, you just start, right? Like, a lot of times things don't work out, things aren't going to be that great, but it's a learning process, and it's a way of you to just put your ideas out there to have that creative outlet, right? Because a lot of it, I would say most of it is for you, right? Like there are other goals in terms of, like, you know, you talk about careers, right? You're talking about the financial side. You can also talk about sides of people who really want to make an impact or really have a lot of views and attention, right? Or even potentially actual like awards and critically acclaimed stuff. Like, there are different things that people want to get out of it. But end of the day, in terms of creativity, in terms of these things that you want to do, most of it, I would say, needs to come from for yourself first, especially at the very beginning. And then from there, you kind of decide which direction you want to go with it, and from there you learn how to do things better and how you can make things for different things. Like you mentioned the book, like that's the idea I had for quite a while, and in a blog post I actually talk about my experience writing the book, how I came up with the idea, and how the process of actually writing it went, and what I learned from that, what I kind of how I felt in that process, and why it took so long from when I first had the idea to. So I talk about all of that in the blog post, and I've reflected on that as well. But one of the biggest things for me, actually, I've been thinking about the book more recently, and I really feel like I've put some really interesting thought and some pretty good stuff in there. So if you guys want to check it out, but yeah, like I think a lot of it is really just, hey, this is this idea that I have, and do I want to do it? Yeah, I do. Do I have time for it now? Okay, maybe not. But next time I have enough time, I am just going to start, right? So I think you really just got to start. And from there, I think you actually pick up more motivation and inspiration. And a lot of times, I think you might even come up with other ideas. I would say creativity is like a muscle, and you work on it, and it gets easier to generate new ideas and produce more and get into more of a rhythm. Just have it be easier to do new things. And with what Lorenzo was saying about writing and that type of stuff, I would say that, there's a lot of truth in what he said, but at the same time, you don't have to actually publish in the stuff you write in the beginning. And
Not true, yeah.
And just writing it, like that helped develop, first of all, your writing skills, which is important, because no matter how good your idea is, if you can't articulate it well, if you can't write it well, it's just not gonna happen for you, right? And secondly, when you're actually writing stuff down, try to articulate it, the idea becomes much more clear. You develop a lot more nuance, and because you're thinking about it, and you're especially thinking about how to phrase everything and how to get your point across, you become better not only at just communicating all of that, but also your ideas sometimes they became not just have more nuance, but they straight up change, right? Like, okay, you know what? Thinking about it now, maybe it's not quite that. Maybe it's actually slightly different, because the way I put it, it's not the message I actually want to get across. My message is actually slightly different than the way I've always thought about it, right? And there are all types of things like that. So just starting, there's so many benefits to it.
100%, yeah. That just got me thinking about how I quite enjoy a lot of the academic writing that I have to do for school, because it gets me writing and it gets me doing stuff without having me come up with an idea. Because I feel like for me, it's not so much the creative process that I don't think I'm ready for. The actual writing bit, I think I'd do fine with. It's actually finding like a half decent idea that I'd want to write about. And until I learn more, I feel like it's hard to. It's the idea generation part, I feel like that's the part that I'd struggle with, because, like, I'm kind of conflicted about this, because, like, on the one hand, like you mentioned, like, you don't have to publish whatever it is that you write. You can just do it for yourself as a creative exercise. But the other side, there's some part of me that's telling me, like, yo, I don't know, not all ideas are created equal, man. It's not even worth writing about it yet. So I feel like when I learn more, and I'm like, I feel like if I would want to write creatively like that, I want to try to get it. I try to write something to like move the geist forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Try to uncover some new value that hasn't been thoroughly explored in some way. But to do that, I feel like you gotta go through the rest of the literature first. Sometimes, or at least through a lot of the more recent literature.
Yeah, well, I think like some of the stuff like the blog post that just came out this week. I was just talking about how I really don't think that you are what you do. I can't talk about other things that I think are more relevant and more accurate in terms of depicting who you really are as a person. Stuff like your intention, stuff like your decision-making process, how you actually end up deciding on doing it, and then like your emotional response, stuff like that I think are just more important. And a lot of time I feel like stuff like this, maybe people talk about some aspects of it, but it doesn't seem like people talk about all the different aspects. And also it doesn't feel like that is a part of the conversation that is like widespread. It's not something people necessarily think about all that often. And when they do think about it, I don't feel like they really consider the aspect I'm talking about as much as, I think is important.
100%. I feel like the issue I have with it is anytime I'm thinking about this sort of stuff, is like, this is one quote that kind of encapsulates it a lot. It's like, all of Western philosophy has been in response to Plato and Socrates. And at first it might seem weird because you might think it would be so far removed nowadays, right? It's like, postmodernism, all that jazz. It's like, for the longest time, I always thought, Greek philosophy, it seems so ancient. There's no chance it's still relevant today, right? But in a way, since it was kind of like the original kind of seed for everything else, it's still very much relevant. So I feel like if I'm going to make any sort of creative or try to generate any ideas, I first want to learn about everything from dating back all the way from Greeks, from the Greek philosophers up to now. See, like, okay, so for example, like, what was that you were just talking about? Oh, like the intentions and whatnot. Like, I forget one, but there's a lot of Christian thinkers and theologists that wrote about stuff like that for the longest time. So I'd want to go learn about that first, and then I'd want to see what that idea developed later as it went from like pre-Renaissance through the Renaissance into the Enlightenment, see how that changed during the Enlightenment. Because surely that must have changed in between like the Middle Ages and the Enlightenment, 100%. All that jazz, seeing how different law systems developed, all that jazz, taking like a very holistic kind of approach to it and seeing how it develops a bit. Kind of like how Foucault oftentimes approaches things.
Okay.
Foucault kind of like, he tries to analyze a lot of these institutions and a lot of the societal constructs, I suppose, that have come up. And it's like, okay, look at for example, the most classic example that he comes up with is the justice system and the criminal justice system specifically, and how we incarcerate people nowadays. Back in the day, it might have seemed inhumane to us now, but back then it was different. Just seeing how those ideas develop through time is, I feel like, what I need to take a gander at. Because otherwise, it's I feel like it's just a very narrow perspective, and I could be missing out on some really good ideas that can help me develop my ideas further. You know. Yeah.
That's actually something to talk about in my book, about expanding your perspective, broadening your perspective. Because a lot of the main kind of thing I talk about is knowing who you are and what it is that you want and making decisions accordingly. And I think a big part of that is not being a direct product of your environment. And with that, a lot of it is expanding your perspective and learning about all these different things. But one of the most important thing I talk about towards the end of that section is that you just gotta, once you're gonna continue to learn new things, reflect on your experiences, reflect on stuff you learn and read about and whatnot. But you also gotta just think about what you actually think for yourself, right? So once you've kind of consumed and understood all these different things from your readings and your experiences, you just have to say, hey, you know what? Fuck all of that. Now I understand it. Now it's in my, in me subconsciously. What do I actually think for myself? Just take away all of that. And that's only one thing I talk about. Other thing I talk about relating to this is how I think a lot of people just don't really spend time by themselves just thinking. And I talk about how a lot of that is with a kind of being addicted to screens. A lot of it is constantly thinking about what other people think and dealing with social pressure and all of that. I just talk about how so much of really understanding yourself is actually trying. And one of the best ways you could try to do that is just, hey, completely disconnect from all the social media for a period of time. Just stop thinking about what everyone else thinks and all of those, and really just think about who you are as a person, what it is that you want, and really just dive into that. And having that type of completely isolated and detached situation, having that on a regular basis or somewhat regular basis, especially after important, I guess, experiences, that's kind of how you could really develop an understanding of yourself, right? Because so much of like things are just, you know what, did you come up with that? Or are you just repeating what your parents told you when you were younger and you never really understood why they even told you that in the first place? Is that just something one of your influential teachers or mentors or coaches have told you? Is that a quote that you've heard about some ancient philosopher or, I don't know, a prolific athlete or whatever, right? And just, hey, let me actually think for myself, knowing all of these things, right? You when you understand more, you really just say, hey, look, let me try my best to ignore the biological and social component of my existence and just look at myself for who I really am. Obviously, the human condition, you could only actually ignore so much. At the end of the day, you are a biological being. End of the day, we do live in a society, and there is interaction with other people and their environment, and that as a whole. So there's only so much you could do. But a lot of that type of thing, you just need to try and find yourself in that sense. And relating it back to creativity, I think maybe not as important when you start, but as you do more creative endeavors, you really need to find a voice for yourself. You really have to find your own style and what it is that you're trying to convey and how you really do things. There are guitarists, electric guitarists and whatnot. You hear them play and you just know their sound. It's like it's the same instrument, it's the same amp. Like you literally turn everything to the same thing. You get a different player, it's not going to sound the same. And I'm relating it to that because it's actually very different, because knowing who you are as a person, knowing who you are as an artist, as a creator, it's different things. But there is that aspect, I mean, individualism and having that kind of personal touch that I think is very important in every aspect of your life and what you're trying to do. But I think what I want to go back and ask Georgie is that, like, do you find it hard to generate ideas like Lorenzo, or do you find it harder to actually do things, create things, get it started or whatnot?
I think I'm struggling with both. With generating ideas, it's easier for, like, if you were to try to create a story or some sort of a character or a world. It's easier since we all consume entertainment, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone watches movies, plays video games, so you're able to take in more ideas. While with Lorenzo, like, you have to go out there and actually do your research before you can really have mm-hmm. a good base and understanding of what you want to do. But I guess it comes back to originality, where you feel like it's not that good of an idea. It's like, no, I think it's already been done before. You kind of just push it aside.
Okay.
And then with actually doing it, committing, again, I guess comes back to the coming up with the idea where it just feels like it's not worth it. It's not going to turn out the way I want it to. And you're just scared to do anything with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I get what I think it makes sense what you're saying. I could totally see why that would kind of prevent you from really starting a project. Mm-hmm. One thing, like, I think we've talked about this before, Lorenzo and Raymond, actually, is the originality and how, nothing is really original. Like, there's always influences from other things in the past, whether consciously or subconsciously. And in terms of art, especially, like, you could see elements of other things. You look in a city, you see buildings from all types of eras, all kinds of different architects, and they draw inspiration from each other, and it's kind of communicating with each other almost. You look at all the fashion, all the basic traditional types of garments. You see the way they've changed over time and the different ways they've tried to do it. End of the day, it's still that type of garment, right? You're not making a completely new thing, right? Yeah. Like, and there are gonna be elements that's gonna be very similar. You're not really gonna have something like so original.
It's very difficult to have like a 100% brand new idea that no one's ever come up with. But I feel like it's perfectly fine though, because in art, right? The most famous painting pieces of art, they're never like brand new original. This is a brand new genre. This is the breakthrough. This is the best thing ever, right? It's always like it might be decades into a certain genre of drawing or whatever, or painting. But I feel like what's important is that at the core of it, they'll have something exceptional about them, right? There'll be something kind of like that differentiates it from the other art, and that's what makes it original. Like, it'll borrow other stuff. Like, for example, It might be in a certain style of painting or whatnot, or it might be a certain type of garment. But the standout ones that we all think about, like the ones that are like, yeah, wow, that's the pinnacle, right? They have some core element that makes them unique like that. So like with painting, a lot of these famous painters are known specifically for things, right? So Caravaggio, he's probably known for a lot of stuff, but he's got some real good paintings. They're all very dramatic looking. He's got a lot of emotion in there.
His use of chiaroscuro is one of the best, right? And he's kind of one of the first to really use that technique that well and become famous for it. And a lot of works for the dramatic kind of image he's able to convey with that technique really stayed throughout time, and people really appreciate it. And a lot of people try to copy it, right, imitate it. And nowadays, that's kind of a signature of that whole time period, the whole Baroque genre, right? And obviously, there are other great artists from the genre who may not necessarily even know the works of Caravaggio that well, but as it was developing, there are similar things that they saw from the previous periods, and there's certain changes and certain direction they want to get to, that they arrive at that point. Then that was like a turning point. But nowadays, as Lorenzo said before, like you don't really see a really specific genre being so broad and all that, right? So
not like every creative work is like a brand new, its own thing. Nothing is like created in isolation. Yeah,
people still make the type of Baroque paintings. They still use the chiaroscuro technique. They still focus on the use of light and that type of thing. And I'm sure with your, I guess, entertainment and video game, that type of focus of digital art, lighting and all of that is still very important. There are certain ideas that you could trace back to these things that really made it famous and brought it to the forefront of what is important in a piece of art, right? So when you want to think about it that way, you really get to see that things aren't that, truly original in that sense. But at the same time, you still have to have kind of your own voice and small nuances that's kind of unique to you and things that you do really well. And if you don't try and start projects and learn from projects and continue to think about it, it's very difficult to develop that and really create those masterpieces, right?
Yeah, well, I feel like what I was trying to get at is that like no art nowadays is really 100% original. And I feel like that's perfectly fine. I feel like that's just inherent to art. For as long as art's been around, that's just how you do it. You just learn from what's been around, right? And then you just try to use it as a medium for telling your own kind of story or your own meaning through it. But just I just want to touch upon really quick the generation of ideas one more time. I don't find it hard to generate ideas, but it's just I feel like right now the ideas that I would want to talk about in writing, and this might be unique to sort of what I would want to write about.
Okay.
This might be unique to, I feel I can come up with ideas, right?
Okay.
Then it's more so like with structuralism kind of being done for, like you're never going to break your experience down into like one thing. This is the way it is. This is 100% like, so trying to find kind of like something a little bit more objective and kind of like make sense of stuff. I feel like you have to look at it from a very historical point of view and make very broad judgments, being like, okay, this is a certain aspect of life that depends on these other factors that changes throughout time because of this or whatever, right? Okay. Instead of being, because if you make those objective statements, they're beholden to your own perspective, right? And I think it's valuable to be knowledgeable of that stuff. So, for example, your sort of exercises, George, where you go through and you think about it for yourself and what you think about it stuff, I think that's really valuable. But if I were going to produce stuff as more of like a creative endeavor, I would try to kind of more make more like more, I don't know, works on the cutting edge of stuff where it's like, and I feel like right now that That might be maybe like analyzing semiotic systems a bit, but that's also kind of in the past as well already. So just taking a very broad look, not necessarily my experience, but trying to understand like the human experience in a more general sense. And doing that, I feel like you need to look at as much information as possible. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it's very difficult to... Because pretty much every single school of thought, it's not been debunked, but it's been kind of moved past, right? Like Stoicism, right? If I spend my whole life writing Stoicism, it's Stoicism. You can still put it in that box. That box is kind of like in the past or whatever, right? If I go my whole life writing, I don't know, on like Cartesian some, that's in the past. You know, we've been past that, right? Could spend my whole life writing about like Platonic ideals. That might not be so bad, but it's Platonic ideals. That topic's been like murdered. It's been moved past. That's not where people think about. Nobody uses Platonic ideals in their modern day lives anymore. There's other sort of conceptions out there, and like beyond that, right? Like people might make like a statement. Like for example, if you go whatever, people make statements about, oh, we have the best criminal justice system out today, right? And that might be true from our perspective. And that might be true for our society right now. But what about in 500 years? You know, when things change. How is it going to look like then? There's going to be changes to it, right? How might that change depending on the society? Like, trying to analyze the core components of it and not just see them as how they are, but how they came to be.
Okay.
I feel like that's what I'd be interested in. And for that, you have to look at, you have to go out and learn. You can't just generate that right off the top of your head. You can get ideas to get you going right off the top of your head, but you got to study for that.
It's like you want something that's always changing, you know, like that never like truly dies, right? You want something that's always like advancing.
Yeah.
Kind of like language in a way,
yeah,
right?
For sure.
So, you know, like you start off, you know, because language is affected by many factors.
100%.
Yeah. So, and a language that doesn't change will most definitely always die off, right? Whereas like language that's able to change and adapt to society is what helps it thrive, right? So like, let's say for English, for example, right, and our modern languages in general, you know, there's new forms of it, right? There's like texting and like, you know, there's like different ways of conveying, like, you know, like communicating. So like there's, you know, emojis now, there's pictures, you know, there's fucking memes, right? Like there's a bunch of ways to communicate, and you could take all that, you know, as a means of like communication, and then like you break it down to like what language is it, you know, like what type of communication is it? Text? Is it, you know, fucking pictograph? I don't know.
We're going back.
Yeah. Devolving.
Somewhere around
but
the
yeah,
21st century, they lost the use of the alphabet.
I mean, emojis are just hieroglyphics, right?
Yeah,
exactly. We're going back in time. But yeah, man. And then, you know, there's like different forms of words. I forgot the name of it, but like, you know, like there's like short forms, right? There's fucking like LOL, LMAO, right?
Oh yeah,
like stuff like that. So like through people and like, you know, society and like how everything changes and how people are able to change it as well, like that's what really makes it, you know, continuous, right? It never truly dies. And that's something very interesting about language, how language has evolved and how it is still evolving.
The language is
and how like like, so I think you're trying to like say something kind of like that, right?
Yeah, kind
like,
of.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because like for example, if I was gonna write something on the nature of language, right, I wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't be able to write something that has any sort of semblance of objective truth, even though that in and of itself might be silly pursuit, if there is such a thing, right? There's been one thinker that I've been looking up recently. Bartz, I forget what his first name is. Ronald Bartz, I think so. Yeah, something like that. And his whole thing was semiotic systems, and eventually he ended up with this thing where it's like everything is just kind of Masters of the Mask. He has this whole demythologizing thing, which is basically where he would analyze things and be like, okay, this is a sign, what does it signify, right? So it would be like, plastic, right? What's the meaning behind plastic? Or I guess what's the connotations behind plastic, I guess is another way to think about it, sort of. Plastic, back when he was writing, it was wonderful, man. It was crazy. Because you can make anything out of plastic. You can make it any color you want, any shape you want, for almost any purpose you want. And that's kind of like the hidden meaning behind plastic, right? Not hidden meaning, but that's kind of what it signified a bit. Or you look at, for example, he had a really good one where he analyzed sumo wrestling. Not sumo wrestling. What's it called? Wrestling, but not actual wrestling. What's the term for it?
WWE stuff?
Yeah, WWE stuff. Yeah, he analyzed that.
Wrestling entertainment, basically.
Yeah, wrestling entertainment. Yeah, he had a really good perspective on it. Shout out Michael Server.
Pro wrestling, they call it, but I don't even like that term very much. I like wrestling entertainment. I like that term.
Yeah, by the way, shout out Michael Server. He's got great lectures on it. But he had, for example, if I were to go rate something about
luchadors
or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I might rate from my perspective, and my perspective would probably end up being what I feel like a lot of people who aren't into pro wrestling think about it. It's like, it's stupid, right? Like, what's the point of pro wrestling, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he had a really good take on it. His take was that it was more of a spectacle than a sport, right?
It is. It literally is.
No, it literally is, yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole point.
Yeah, and so like a lot of people scoff at it. It's like, you already know the ending. It's so stupid. Why bother watching it? Right? Like that's always what I thought. It's like, it's scripted. Okay, well, what the fuck? What's the point? Why am I gonna go watch this? Who cares, right? But as a social experience, when people go out there and they're cheering for like their favorite wrestlers, one example that Michael Sergi used in his lecture on Bartz is, for example, you might have Hulk Hogan out there dressed in like some American garb or something. Pretend to be like an American hero. You know, people are going to cheer for him as an American hero, right? Yeah. And that's kind of like the signal there is kind of like, oh, you know, America #1 or whatever, right? Something like that. He also did a reading into Rambo. Michael Sergi did from the perspective of Bartz a little bit. So, and that was like, okay, it was the Vietnam War. They just retreated or whatever. Here's Rambo. Nah, bro, we're still winning, bro. Rambo's telling the American people, we're still winning out here. Unkillable, right? And looking at it from like that sort of perspective where it's like you're trying to break stuff down, you try to extract something from it, and trying to see like what the cause of it is, what it means, kind of like on a more deeper level.
I feel like it's a pretty basic level. That's kind of how
basic. He took I didn't quite finish explaining the Luchador one, but he took it a little bit further, and it's like, for example, if you look at Oedipus, right, which is tragic, it's kind of, or one of the classic tragic plays. It's kind of weird how nowadays people scoff at, you know, pro wrestling, but they think like Oedipus and all the old tragic plays are like the peak of culture, right? But back then it was probably more like more so like more like pro wrestling back then, and it just happens to just change over time, right? And that's just where we're at now. So just seeing how that changes is just, I feel, really interesting, because it's like, oh, okay, dang, I still think pro wrestling's super dumb, but that's kind of neat. I never thought about it that way. I always used to think it's just a complete waste of time, and like it's just such a dumb spectacle. I thought it was like akin to watching just regular ass TV, right? You know, just like it's whatever. There's no point to it.
TV is the same type of thing, anyways. Like,
to an extent, not always though. I think it depends on the show, I suppose. But goddamn, The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, that shit is so garbage, man. You can't tell them, nah. Pro wrestling over that shit every day, 100%.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of similarities though. Like if you're gonna think
No,
about
there
it
are.
like that. And
There
I
are,
also
yeah,
feel like,
100%.
that way of thinking is not necessarily that deep. I feel like if you're
No,
actually
I
gonna
didn't
if you're
finish
actually gonna
explaining.
look at
Yeah,
anything, that's how you would. You will want to know the history of it. You will want to relate it to other things, and you will want to think about it like that. I feel like
yeah, hundred
that's
percent.
just how, if you're thoughtful at all, that's kind of the way you would
Yeah,
go
I didn't
about
finish
it.
explaining Bart's. There's more to it. There's more to it for
Okay.
sure. But I'll leave that for another time. I'll send you the lecture. It's so good. It's really good.
Yeah, no, sure. Definitely, yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
100%.
I mean, he just got really good lectures no matter what the topic is. So,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
yeah. I wanted to say something about something earlier, but I can't remember it. I'm losing power.
You're losing power.
Uh, yeah. Maybe we can move on to something else, I guess. Yeah, but no, we have Georgie on, and this topic is on creativity. The stuff we talk about, a lot of it is related to it, but not necessarily
It's quite
directly.
tangential. Yeah.
Yeah, not directly, on topic. But I guess with Georgie, like when you're doing this program now, do you feel like it's working on like your creativity, or is it more technical? Like, do you see that difference? Like, what do you think?
Definitely, this program that I'm taking is technical, more technical, since it's lots of schools around here. It's quite broad almost.
Yeah.
At least for the like fine art side. If you were to do like 3D modeling or more of the, I'm not sure what you would call it. That stuff's more technical, right? You need to learn the 3D program. So I'd say those are more on the technical side, and the program I'm taking as well, it's directly related to the entertainment industry. So it's it's a good what's the word? Very
starting point, launching point.
good starting point. Good. It's focused.
Okay.
But for sure, while you're doing these, for my course, every week you have a different assignment. So you do need to still. They give you a starting point, an idea, but you have to build off of that. So it does definitely help with the creative side as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's very interesting. I was wondering about that because the stuff we talked about earlier, and trying to think about my experience with the academic side, right? I did research over the summer, and when it comes to scientific research and academic stuff, a lot of it is needing kind of other literature. Like you make so many references, right? That you can't just say something. It's okay. What you have to read a lot of stuff, and you need to find at least reviews. But a lot of times, what you gotta find is actual original research and reference that. I think this. Well, I'm hypothesizing this because based on previous literature, blah 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 blah, they found this and that and that. And from there, like that's your starting point. Like the stuff people have done before, the techniques that exist in the field. Then from there, you can hypothesize what you want to, what you think might happen and how you're going to actually test that. And then analyzing the results and figuring, hey, what does it all mean, right? So I think there's a side between the technical and the creative. Like when you think about science, you might not always think about creativity as much, but so much of it is innovation, so much of it is tackling the problem from different angles, and those are all aspects of creativity, right? And so you have the previous knowledge part, like we've talked about with Lorenzo, having the background, the research, and needing all those stuff. And then there's a technical aspect that you discussed that are different relevant. So I'm just kind of interested in the separation there, a separation between what is kind of required for creativity at times. Because I feel like that's becoming very clear now with the stuff we talked about so far, and especially with what I just described, tying it together. So, Lawrence, you don't feel like you could produce, or you don't really produce something that you want unless you have all the...
As an analogy, it would be like if I wrote something right now, and it would just be if I just like put my thoughts out on some paper or whatever. It would be as if I had sat down and I started making some Neolithic pottery, man. That's how I feel about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it. Yeah, that's basically how I feel, because it would be kind of like what we talked about, right? If we take somebody, even like the greatest artist of all time, right, and we'd put them in isolation, you take Michelangelo, and yes, you clone him, you go back in time, you kidnap him as a baby, and you put him in with some like African tribe in the middle of nowhere that hasn't developed civilization yet. They're just in a tribe or whatever, and he's not going to be able to make those great paintings. There's no shot, absolutely no shot. Similarly, I don't think I'm there yet. I haven't gone through, like, if I'm going to make a painting or whatever, not a painting, if I'm going to make a writing, I'd have to go through and kind of examine something or learn something first, It's just, kind of like if there's a progression in ideas, it's not, you can't write the same way people used to write like 100 or 200 years ago, just because of the recent developments in thought.
Yeah.
You can, but I feel like it limits it in its scope of it a little bit. And it's kind of, you can just label it as like, oh, it's just another interpretation from like this older idea. It doesn't further the more, I guess, cutting edges. And for the cutting edge, you gotta take a very rigorous approach to it, I feel.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there's hella stories about Foucault. And he would apparently spend dozens of hours in the library just researching and reading and like writing so much. And he just put in so much work. And if you look at his work, he's one of the most referenced. I guess what would his field be? I don't know. Social psychology, I think that might be. Yeah, it might be one of them. Not social psychology, but
sociology.
He is very highly regarded. Yeah, his ideas are very highly regarded, or at least highly referenced. Which, if you get a lot of people talking about your ideas, then you must have something worthwhile, to talk about. Whether people be refuting it, or they're people refuting it en masse, or developing it from there en masse, then surely you have like a good idea there, and people are either, oh, you know what, I actually disagree with that, even though he has a compelling argument and stuff like that. And trying to get that sort of compelling argument in something that's like, okay, wow, this is some new knowledge that you've discovered. I feel like that's the tricky bit. That's not part of the creative process, but kind of hinders me from exercising the creative process to an extent. And that's, like I mentioned, why I like the academic writings that I have to do. It's because I don't have to worry about that. It's just, I just got to get the assignment done.
Okay.
So then I can write and I can articulate the ideas and I can manipulate them, like you mentioned earlier, through the writing process. So, it's kind of like a painter that doesn't have something to paint about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. I think, just relating that, like, one thing I talk about in my book, because, like, the whole thing is really just based about, like, how I think about different things, right? But there's definitely a major focus on kind of living your truth, I guess, in a way. I don't know if that's the way I would personally describe, but that's kind of like how a lot of people talk about this type of thing.
I feel like that's actually really interesting, because when you kind of have that goal in mind for your book, I feel like that's one of the things that lets you write so well, or lets you write about these topics, is that you have like a set goal in mind with that book, where it's like, okay, the book is going to be on my interpretation of how to live your happiest life or whatnot. I forget who it was.
One of the things I talk about is why fulfillment is more important than happiness, and all the things that I don't like about the focus on being happy, and why I basically think that being happy is overrated in the way people talk about it.
Yeah, 100%. So like, there's so much literature on just that topic alone, on like, the pursuit of happiness, and whether or not that's even like should be a focus, things like that. So, for example, if I were going to go write something, I would like to understand that literature and then try to make something of it for myself there. Because there's just so much out there for that stuff.
Yeah. So the way I do look at a lot of literature and a lot of, I guess, information in general, but I also look at kind of the general perception of different things that I see in society, especially of like current times. And I think writing stuff about that kind of either challenges it and just providing different perspective on what is common nowadays. Like the thing I wanted to bring up was actually relates to whatever you said back about how one person thought at whatever time had best justice system or whatnot. But like, and also it's a thing that that I said we're going to talk about in a separate and its own episode. But yeah, it's an idea that I don't believe in, like morality, right? I don't label things as good, bad, evil, and right, wrong, stuff like that.
There's a lot of there's a lot of literature. So for example, I feel like one way to, I guess, summarize my difficulties in not generating ideas but putting them down on paper it would be sort of like your research that you mentioned earlier. We have to reference everything. For me to write something down and be happy with it, I'd have to go through and like read through everything and then be okay, I'm gonna reference this. I wouldn't actually reference it because it's not really an empirical paper, but that's the sort of idea I'd have to base it around. Like, okay, these are the ideas. This is what people have come up with. What do I like and what do I not like about the ideas that people have had,
Yeah. See, that's the thing.
Then try to work it out from there.
Like I try my best to look at these different ideas, and then at the end of the day, I try to forget about those ideas when I'm actually writing it and just think about what I think, because I already let those ideas affect my thinking. I've already gotten what I wanted out of those ideas, so I don't want to talk about other people's idea like that. I want to consume everything, use it, and then when I'm producing, it's just my stuff, So I don't want to be talking about specifically, and even when I do talk about other people's stuff, I talk about my interpretation of their stuff, the way I feel and think about their stuff, not necessarily what they actually wanted to convey. I think I talk about what's meaningful to me, right? And when I talk about art and what stuff, mean in paintings and whatnot, it's like, and also with songs and lyrics, it's like, okay, I know, like they said, it's about that, right? But to me, that's not what it means to me, right? And my focus in everything is on the individual. It is on the personal. It is about what each individual thing is. And my creative process, a lot of it is getting to that point, right? So yes, for me, the prerequisites for a lot of things is that research on the background, on the history, on the context. But I don't want to, in general, actually reference that when I'm talking about a lot of these things, because I think it does a disjustice and it takes away from my perspective. It gets in the way of creating something new, right? That's the way I feel about it, right? So I look at different things. I look at facts. I look at all those. And then I say, what do I think of it? Not what other people thought about it, even though that I have read some stuff I like, some stuff I think are relevant, some stuff I think are thought-provoking from other people in this topic, right? So that's kind of the difference in creative approach when it comes to writing between us, I would say. And I definitely do want to do an episode on morality as a whole, and instead of just a moral dilemma episode we did way back. I think this is like episode 29. We're 30 now. We've been doing this for quite a while, actually.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Pretty good.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah. So I guess going back to Georgie, what kind of is your creative process? What are the prerequisites? What are the things that are needed for you to actually be creative? You know.
It's what I find is the best way to come up with interesting things is just intuition. When I think too much, it just doesn't work. So one thing I do that's kind of relaxing is just scribble on a piece of paper and just see what I see. Like if I see a face or some kind of armor design, something like that, it's mostly on intuition. And then from that, like same with research, you just kind of look at what other artists have done. Like once you get that basic idea, then you can go down and start digging into things, being like, okay, what do armor pieces have? How are they interconnected? How do these you just look into many different things. And from that, depending on people, I like the idea you were talking about where you don't, similarly, where you don't let other people, the things you've consumed, you don't just go off of them. You do build off of them, but you don't think about them.
Yeah, exactly.
So the same for me as well. I just get all these different pictures, images on a reference board, and I try not to go, I look through them, but I don't want to get stuck on them. So I just build kind of a visual library where I can freely explore without being stuck on it and looking at the images that I have while I'm actually drawing. So you do that beforehand before you just keep building off of it.
Yeah. That actually reminds me of kind of jazz with improvisation and solos. You know, there are people who stick to very, I guess, fundamental aspects of music, different, you know, it's obviously all going to be based off of scales, but some people stick to scales so much that they pretty much just play different patterns within a skill, or that they really focus on imitating one person's style and even straight up quoting or lifting specific phrases and whatnot from them. And I think like you're talking about being creative and what we talk about with having your own voice and kind of different ways you want to create for yourself and have kind of new ideas, right? Especially good new ideas in quotation, right? Stuff that other people might value, stuff that you think actually are good, right? You kind of have to not stick so closely to one thing, right? One specific thing and be stuck on that. You look at all these ideas, you understand them, you learn from them, but when you're actually creating them, you might take bits and pieces from each in some kind of way. You could do something that people could see the influence from specific people and whatnot, but they could also tell very clearly that's not just from them. You're not straight up just doing what they did. You're not even doing it in the exact same style as they did, right? Like it's a different type of communications with creatives from the past or even contemporary, people trying to do the similar things. But like that's not being stuck on specifically one thing or even being stuck on several things, just having those things there, allowing you to get your ideas flowing, for you to have these ideas, to have this essence that you could really that you really feel and work with, right? I think that's the most important thing when you're doing the background research in a creative endeavor for me, right? Because it's so important, but at the same time, when you're just stuck on them, like that's what stops me from, I guess, doing it more like Lorenzo. I know what you describe isn't exactly what I don't like, because there's a lot I do like about it, but there is that.
It's different, yeah.
Yeah, but there is a a closer tie to what I really don't like, and that is being stuck with specific things like that, as Georgie described.
Yeah.
I feel like if I tried to do it your way, I might end up getting stuck, whereas you might not.
Well, I don't even know if you could do it my way, because your whole focus is more on like the personal.
Exactly.
And I feel like for that, I feel like it's almost necessary to kind of do that to some extent, at least. Whereas me, I'm not so focused on the personal and what it might mean for me. Even though at the back of my head, that's a lot of what I think about, right?
Yeah.
Anytime I learn about something new, I try to assimilate that into my thinking. So like for you, for example, I don't know, just to make an analogy out of it, you'd be more like just a painter with like a blank canvas. And then you've seen, like, you'd be basically Georgie, you know, you have, you have your reference board and whatnot, and then you're trying to create something original out of it. Me, I'd be more like, I don't know, this might be a bad analogy, but it would be more like a car mechanic maybe. Like I have two things that I have to work with, right? I have the body of work before me. I have like the car, which is like, these are all the previous ideas that people have had, right? And I'm trying to fix it or make it better somehow. And then along with that, I also have the tools that were generated in the creation of this car, right? So like mechanics have a bunch of mechanics tools that have been created for mechanics. Those might be certain ways of thinking or certain modalities of thinking that have come up as this car has been constructed. And then I could think, okay, I can modify the tool to make this change to the car. I can use this tool here to do this to the car. I can change it a certain way. Or, you know, you can get crazy with it and try to do something bananas and try to make a new part for the car. But that's obviously significantly more difficult to do. So I feel like that's kind of more akin to what I'm doing, where it's not like trying to generate something new. I'm trying to modify something that's already been done, but try to modify it in a way that's satisfactory, you know what I mean? To make it either better or more universal, or somehow improve it in some way.
Okay. Yeah. See, I do like stuff being more universal, but I like it to be from the kind of idea that I feel like people thought about a person's own ideas, their own individual ideas. I feel like from that, it becomes universal, right? So,
oftentimes, but I mean, I feel like that's one of the reasons why the historical perspective is so important, because everything is so beholden to context, right? So to try to extract something beyond context and move past it and try to find something that's not transitory like that, I feel that's the trickiest bit right now.
Yeah. So
try to find something that transcends that stuff.
So, you know, with a lot of ideas, I really just think, you know, I don't feel that way about it. You know, it doesn't seem like what some very popular perceptions of it within society, especially currently, really reflect how I think about it. And I just try to actually articulate how I think about it. Then I investigate why, and then from there I look at other people's, you know, opinions. I look at writings about it, and I look at the way that specific concept is kind of talked about in religious kind of contexts in different historical periods and in different places, right? I mean, just one thing that I was writing about in this week's blog post when I'm talking about kind of you're not what you do. I don't feel like it's as simple as that. The third kind of very important aspect I talked about is the emotional response. And I felt, like I said, a controversial thing in the current, I guess, context. And that is that I said I would prefer that, you know, when someone, I prefer, like, I don't think I said this exactly, but not sure exactly what I said, but for now, I guess I'll say something very similar, at least, is that I would prefer a criminal to not have any remorse or regret, because for me, it's very important that a person is doing what they actually want to do, a person living their own truth. So I could judge a person for their actions and their intentions and all of that, but I would judge them even more if they had regrets and remorse about it, right? Because that's how I feel about something, right? Because that really articulates what's important to me about a way a person lives and how a person really lives a fulfilled life, right? So when I'm talking about in that context about what a person is, and I'm relating to how I feel about it, I feel like from that message, it provokes people to think about how they feel about these things, about trying to understand why I would think that way. And then perhaps they understand why it's important to me, the way a person lives and how a person lives, right? And maybe they would, from there, have their own idea about, okay, maybe he's onto something, but not quite like that. Maybe I feel, have them to actually start generating their own ideas and really think about how they want to live and how they make these decisions and how they feel about these things, how they might judge other people, and what they feel like is the most important aspects that reflects who a person really is, right? So I'm just saying, like, just give me an example on how I try to generate ideas and articulate them, how I do it, and how I think that could be universal, right? So I think, yes, it's personal, but in this aspect, it's this kind of personal thing can become universal if someone actually, exactly, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like in that sense, it also allows you to have much easier way of having your own personal voice because it's so uniquely you when you're talking about it, right? And it's actually very vulnerable, I would say, to really showcase your thought in that way, especially something that is perhaps controversial, because I think saying that you would prefer someone who did a terrible thing, quote unquote, to have no remorse and no regret. I feel like it's not something is kind of the common idea.
No, that
right?
that really threw me off. At first, I was like, "Night." Yeah, I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
No, I see where you're coming from. Yeah. I see. Would you judge them more harshly if they have remorse or regret? It's kind of tangential, I suppose. The point of it was to kind of explain your thinking, not so much that specific example. I feel like it's kind of hard to describe. It's almost it's not narrow in scope, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's just kind of like with the axioms you're working with, right? Like these sort of assumptions. Or not necessarily assumptions, but you're making some assumptions when you're doing this, and they're very broad. They're basically, like, for example, you're focused on the personal. I feel like that's in a way kind of an assumption, right? Because that's kind of what you're basing it off of, and I feel like it's 100%. I agree with you. I think it's really good to do that exercise where you're looking at it from your own perspective. And just kind of putting it out there and what you think and what you make of things without referencing the other material. Yeah, 100%. I feel like that's really good. That's where you get a lot of great work from. Like, for example, Stoicism and like a lot of these schools of thought when they're first born, or where a lot of ideas were generated from. They just almost come up out of thin air.
Other reason why I think this is very important, like why I do this, is not just because that I think that I like to talk about the personal side, and why I think it's also kind of universal, but also because I think it's if you read like my book and the blog post, I think a general theme you'll see is like what I said, my focus on individualism, and what I think is important is that people actually have their own personal ideas on things, right? So that's what I'm interested in, not just for myself, but for other people, right? I want people to develop their own thoughts and think about their own experience in that sense, and do this type of creative exercise about themselves, right? So what you're talking about, I think a lot of time I'm just straight up not interested in, right?
Yeah, no.
I want each person to literally just have their own ideas about things. That's what I would like, and that's what I'm interested in, and that's what kind of the idea I hope to spark within people, is for them to think about what they personally think about things.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like it's just for that. The reason why I'm interested in understanding it in like a more broad, like social historic context, is because if you take, again, going back to like you just take a baby and you drop in the middle of nowhere, they're not going to come up with the same ideas as somebody who's, currently in our society, right? You take a baby, you drop him in the middle of like Iceland. No, not Iceland. There's actual people in Iceland. Greenland, there we go. In the middle of Greenland or something, bro. Who lives in Greenland? No. But like somewhere outside of like the Western culture, or somewhere where life is more primitive, and there hasn't been that development of ideas, so those ideas haven't been developed and become part of the society and culture. They're not going to reason the same way as you or I might. They're not going to think the same way. They're going to come up with completely different ideas from what people over here think about it. Like, look at the contrast in between a lot of the Middle Eastern countries and the prevailing kind of like cultural thoughts there versus here, or the differences in between individuals from, say, China and here, right? The cultural influences have been demonstrated to have cognitive, have been documented to have like caused cognitive differences in individuals, where they're more likely to think in a more group-oriented manner versus an individual-oriented manner. And I find like that's kind of one of the reasons why it's really important to break it down and think about it in a more kind of like a removed situation, where you move the individual experience from it. So you're trying to kind of like discern something. You're trying to like isolate X, if you will, You're not just trying to put the numbers through the equation. You're trying to like isolate the equation. You're trying to like maybe derive something or integrate it somehow. You're trying to manipulate it in a way to get something more basic out of it, and you're trying to extract that core out of it.
Okay.
And I feel like that would be like when I was talking about the paintings earlier. They have something unique that makes them worthwhile, right? I feel like that's what would make my ideas worthwhile with my pursuits. That's kind of what my goal would be. Your goal is completely different. So straight up from what you're saying. So like one thing I already said in this episode is that the idea that a very important thing is to not be a direct product of your environment, right? So the whole idea is to consume other stuff and broaden your perspective, because you can't really have original thoughts. You can't really have your own ideas if you only know a very few ideas, right? It's kind of from knowing a lot of stuff that you could start, because hey, people think about it that way. I never thought about it that way before. Hey, people live like that. I didn't even know people could live like that. I didn't even know that thing existed, right? Yeah. So when you broaden your perspective in so many things, from so many things that you consume and actually experience for yourself, then you are able to actually just say, hey, you know what? Now that I know these things, I now have this background information, I'm not going to get stuck on one specific thing like George was talking about. From this point, I'm going to try and get my own individual and personal view on all these different things, right? Because from there, you can actually generate ideas, right? So absolutely, the context is so important. Just the way I think about it, and my goal is I use the context in a different way than you do. I feel like that's a huge difference. And the way is like we have different goals in terms of like the stuff we're trying to write and what is interesting us creatively, right? Yeah, there we go. I think that explains it pretty well. Yeah. Bit
yes.
of a tangent, but yeah.
Well, it's a bit of a tangent at the same time. It's on the creative process on things
Oh,
we're
yeah, no,
actually
yeah.
interested in, and
That's
for
true,
me,
that's true,
I
yeah.
actually write about and talk about. So I feel like it's not as much of a tangent as on other episodes.
Oh no, that's true. Yeah.
I don't know which one it was, but about the Anglo-Saxons, I felt like that was a
man.
little bit.
Oh, that was classic. That was so good.
Did everyone just go on that tangent, or was just the one person?
Oh,
Oh, man,
no,
what
no.
was it again?
You were talking about, I forget what it was actually, but Raymond was trying to say Anglophones, but he said the native Anglo-Saxons. Which I know, very a lot of native Anglo-Saxons here.
Oh yeah, it's still around. Yeah.
That was pretty good. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you're actually working on anything more, but like you, Raymond, you do talk about your idea of like streaming of that type of entertainment in the video content creation format. Like when you think about it, what would your kind of creative process be? Like, have you thought about that aspect, or have you not gotten that far into it?
I feel like generally speaking, your creative process goes from, it's not like it's not entirely different when it comes to like different topics, I guess. So you kind of have like the same school of thought throughout. And I think for me, it has to be something, like I know clearly, it doesn't have to be 100%, outright amazing or perfect, because there is, if I'm putting it out there, I'm expecting people with, different perspectives, different backgrounds to, to see, or to consume the content I put out. So I know for a fact there isn't really a right or a wrong. And most likely I'll probably go off of what I like, right? If I personally like the video, if I personally enjoy it, I see there's a point to it, right? Then I'll more than likely upload it. But if I were to dislike something about it, and maybe it happens throughout the whole entire video or whatever, like the length of it or whatever it is, that I may kind of restart or find something else to do, because like I feel like there's so many different aspects that happens, because it's also unpredictable, right? If you're playing a game compared to like like drawing, it's entirely unpredictable because it includes the online aspect too, which then adds more like RNG kind of deal. So you never really know what's gonna happen. But I kind of figure, if I enjoy my own content and if I enjoy creating my own content in a way that I like and I prefer, then chances are, if I put it out there, similar, people with similar mindsets, and perspective as I do might enjoy it as well. And then maybe, like have like a following, kind of like more of like a community base, like where people are kind of similar yet different in their own ways, but similar when it comes to like the content itself. Yeah, I don't know, I just, as long as I enjoy it and I feel like like I'm almost like proud of it, right? Like I want to be like proud of everything I put out, rather than like second guessing myself like throughout, like after every view, every second, like the next day be like, oh, you know what, like not as many views, I don't know. If I'm proud of something, dude, like I'm letting it out there, it's staying put, right? Unless there's any violations, but still it's staying put, bro. no way I'm removing it. Whatever happens, and you know, that way I won't really regret, or that way I won't really second guess on what I want to make. Whereas I'm, you know, having my mind set on something is better than having my mind on the fence of something.
Yeah, just having that conviction, I guess.
Yeah. You know, I don't wanna be second guessing all my decisions all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I don't wanna always question my own decisions. You know.
How can
Yeah.
how can you be, I guess, proud of yourself when you are self-critical? Like, yeah.
So I guess in a way, like, there's it's when you're proud. I'd say, like, for me, when I'm proud of something I've done, it's not entirely I've done it 100% correctly. It's more like I've done it, you know, not 100% to the best of my abilities, but to a level where I'm
Satisfied?
like, where I'm a little bit over that like, you know, being satisfied. You know, I'm almost like fulfilled with like what I've done. You know, I'm like, yeah, I'm content with it. I'm more than content with it in a way. It's not necessarily like I'll still like criticize my own, you know, like things, you know, because that's how you learn and that's how you grow. You know, that's how you make things better, even like if not for others, like definitely for you, right? That's how you like build upon yourself. So like the being critical is there, but there's like a fine line between like being critical and, you know, like seeing all the mistakes, you know, like the bad parts, I guess, quote unquote bad parts in there, and seeing, you know, what, like the whole picture of it, right? Like what you've actually created. And you know, because the bad parts are only parts of it. It's not necessarily the whole creation of it. You know, you don't take, like I said, like if something I don't like goes on through the whole entire part, then maybe I'll scrap it, right? But you know, like if it's only a part of it, then I could still say for myself, I'm still, if not like fully proud, I'm still proud of it, right? In a way. That doesn't necessarily mean I don't, you know, like I deny that there's like all like it's perfect, right? This video absolutely amazing. It's a you know, home run, you know.
Masterpiece.
Yes, sir.
Flawless.
instant hood classic, bro.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, you know, it's that fine line where you're like, you know what, I'm proud of it, but next time I could do better. You know?
Yeah, I think for me, I definitely relate a lot to that. I think for me, when I think about it, it's a lot of appreciating the journey and really seeing the beauty that is there, right? And then also, yes, look at all the different places for improvements. Yes, look at all the other things I still gotta learn, and just all those aspects that you are gonna be critical about. But at the same time, you know, you really got to see the things you've done, quote unquote, right. The things that you've done the way that you wanted to do, the things that matched kind of your vision when you first started, right? If the whole thing is just gone absolutely awful and you know, that's perhaps very difficult. But at the same time, even then, there's a lot you can learn from. And the fact that you've actually decided to set out and do it, that means something, because if you didn't start at all, like I've said this before, I think maybe one, maybe even 2 episodes, but I've been setting at least one, and that is kind of like you've already failed if you wanted to do something and don't start, because you know succeeding, right, is you know, you you do it the way you want to, your vision really come to life, right? But failing is that not coming to life. So if you already have that vision, you already have that idea, whether you start or not, all right, you the failure point is the same. So once you have that vision and you don't start, you've already failed. So why don't you start? And that's the only way you could actually have the chance to succeed, right? So once you have the idea and decided, yeah, this is something that I think I actually really want to do, you just got to try it. And then from there, you just learn from it. And then by the end of it, when you're looking at it, hey, parts of it actually matched my vision for it. Some of this actually came out to be the way I wanted it to. And then, yeah, there are things to be critical about. So just really appreciating the process and thinking about the failure and the way I do, I think helps push you to really start and try, right? I think that those are kind of, I think those are the main things in terms of answering your question.
I think I like the points you made too. You kind of like you can't really build anything if you don't start in the first place, right? And through building that, and like really seeing your vision, and I guess like seeing what you've done right and wrong to your vision, I think that's where originality comes from. Like back to the first few points we were all talking about, and that's how you give like a certain characteristic of your own, right, to whatever content or whatever creation you're doing. And that's how you start realizing like this is your work rather than a piece of work, right? Yeah, that's it. But yeah, that was a very good question, Georgie.
How do you feel about it, Georgie?
Yeah.
One thing recently is I guess posting work on different social platforms. It's like I'm not sure with drawing, it's from different artists, and from hearing from them, there's this thing that people always mention where there's your technical skill, your hand, your how you're able to draw, and there's also your what you see, and how those always improve, but not at the same rate. So then you have these periods of time where your hand skills, your drawing skills, are above your eye skills, your looking skills. So everything you draw looks really good. You're like, oh, this is great. Like, this is awesome. What I'm drawing is awesome. But then, because what you're seeing, you think it's perfect, then your drawing doesn't get better. But as you look at other pieces of work, you're looking at many different things, anatomy, perspective, then your eye skills improve. And now everything you draw is shit. You're like, oh, I suck. I'm terrible.
I didn't realize it was this bad, bro. I thought it was good.
So it's this, I'm not sure if there's if it's comparable to other like different like artistic.
It definitely is, man. I can tell you that. Like in music, like my years have always been bad. But over the years, they have gotten better, even though still bad. But you can actually hear more things, not just with tone and tuning, but actually really understanding the phrasing, the musicality of music and solos, improvisation, etc. And you can really tell, you know what? That is actually so basic and primitive and uninspired, but I thought it sounded good before. Now thinking about it, hey, what even was that? And even writing, when you don't know what good writing and whatnot it looks like, it's very difficult to write something that's actually good, right? And it could be good in many ways, because some of my favorite writers are like George Orwell and then like Ernest Hemingway, who writes in completely different ways. With Orwell, his sentence, they're very long. It's very interesting. There's just so much happening with the syntax, with the grammar, and then the words he used. But with Hemingway, it's very simple writing. But the story he's able to tell with the writing, with the sentences, he keeps it simple. He uses basic words. He keeps it short. But the way he could tell these stories with the language that he used, and I think the simplicity actually adds to it, right? So there are just different ways of writing, different things that you can do that without seeing these things being possible, and how well these things are actually, how good writing looks like, how these different styles of good writing looks like, how these different ways of a good solo sound like, without knowing that the stuff you think are good, like once you gain that perspective, once you understand, it's okay, I gotta do a lot better in all these different things, right? So it's definitely comparable, and I think it's a very good point that you brought up.
It's just it's a pain, because it's just constant. Like with anything, I guess it's a constant battle trying to figure things out. And when you're stuck in these ruts, it's difficult to be proud of something and to put it out there, because you're like, it's shit. Not sure.
Do you do that even if you're not putting something out, or is it? Is that just? Are we just talking about more in relations with when you're actually releasing content versus just producing it? Because do you think that way when you just say sketching or drawing something that you're not going to put on social media, that you're not going to show to anybody else?
Yeah, still the same things do happen. When
interesting, yeah.
But there are, like, when you start to, with sketches, it's not, well, it doesn't look the way you want it to, but it's not so bad, since it's just a sketch. But when you start to work on like a finished piece, there's so much work you put into it that sometimes, like, you can't figure it out. You can't figure out what's wrong. You don't know what's wrong. And you just kind of leave it at that, kind of like, whoa.
Spylar.
Oh.
Very nice.
It sounds
I
like
was worried this is going to happen. I was like, damn, this podcast is going on for a while. My alarm is going to go off. For sure.
Yeah.
My bad.
It's all good. Well, I don't know if you are continuing your thought, but
no, I think I've lost it. I think I got out what I.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I wanted to ask Lorenzo kind of about this, as he's a coach in gymnastics and whatnot.
Yeah.
In terms of progression and just getting better in these things. Well, what would you say? Like, we talk about kind of knowing what's good, right? Knowing the different ways that things can be done. You can't get better without knowing what's good. Like that's kind of a huge thing, right? So, as a coach, do you have any insights to the process and progression?
Well, there's this concept that's called physical literacy that might relate to this pretty nicely, which is just the sense that once you get moving and you do a lot of stuff, and you don't just see it in gymnastics, you see it in like every other sport too. You just you see somebody who's really athletic, they're very coordinated, they're very agile. You say that they're very physically literate, they know where their body is in space, all that jazz. So it makes it very easy for them to learn skills. So once you learn a lot of the prerequisites and you're comfortable moving your body, you just build off of that, right? So it's similar in that sense. You need to know the basics, and then you build off of that knowledge, right? Like, for example, with handstands, you don't just go right to handstands. You first try them up against the wall. You get comfortable being upside down. Once you're comfortable being up, then you can build off of that and make it more complex. And I feel like that's kind of the entirety of movement, really. You have to build up from the basic skills and then slowly work through it. It's also a motor skill. So to an extent, it's kind of inevitable that you're going to fail. So I feel like that's something that's quite different from the perspective you guys are having on your art, where it's kind of like, oh, if it doesn't meet the criteria, it's all that jazz. Like, quite frankly, it just takes hundreds of reps to get some stuff down. So, like, if you don't get something first try or second try, then, well, you're just not physically literate enough to get it first or second try. But that's fine, because you can, if you train properly, you can literally get hundreds of reps in for something. Depending on what skill it is, right? It depends. Some of the more high impact skills, that's just not feasible. But even if you get tens of tries in, within a week or two, you could easily get a skill that seemed impossible a week ago. But it's just about actually sitting down and working on it.
Yeah.
So in that way, it's a little different. Beyond that, the creative process is kind of nice, because you get once you know what all these skills do, you can start thinking about how you kind of like combine them together, and that expands your knowledge a little bit. That can be creative in a way when you're trying to combine the skills.
Yeah.
Because linking certain moves together, this is more in relations to parkour. With gymnastics, it's pretty much all been done before, so you're not gonna come up with like some new crazy way to do it.
But it used to be.
Yeah. It used to be. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. But nowadays, there's kind of like, it's a very set linear path that you'll learn. You learn cartwheels, then you learn round-offs, then you learn round-off back tucks. Not in that order. There's a lot of stuff in between, obviously.
Well, it could be newer things if you do more contemporary stuff and less like the tournament. So it's possible. Just kind of more traditional competition stuff, I think, are kind of more rigid now, because all the very creative
scoring,
stuff.
Yeah, it's just how they score it, right? Because if you try to add your flair to it, make it look spicy, there's a good chance you're just gonna get points stocked off anyways, because you're like, oh, this was wrong and this was wrong or whatever, something like that. That's one of the things I like about parkour. There's no specific right way to do it. Back in the day, it used to be this kind of debate about like what parkour should focus on, whether it should be on speed or whether it should be on being fancy, or doesn't matter what it is.
I can't believe that we talked about being creative and outlets. You didn't mention parkour. I mean, come on, man.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Hey, man, I woke up. At the time, I had just woken up, man. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I guess parkour would absolutely count. That one's fun, yeah.
Yeah.
That one's really good. Just finding out new challenges to do. That one's really good. I love parkour. That's great. I feel like I just see it a little differently, though. It just seems like such a physical thing. I didn't really count it as art. Same thing as dance, I wouldn't, if I was a dancer, I would. I'm not saying it's not an art or a creative experience, because there's a lot of creativity in there. But when I think about it, I don't think about it as like a primarily creative thing, even though it is very creative. There's a big component there. It just
I would say even for some athletes in like basketball and soccer and whatnot, they're creative. Like when you see them play, like they're not playing quote unquote uninspired, right? The way they play, like there's an extra thing to them. Like they've got the sauce, right? You could say stuff like that. Like they got a special something. They got the je ne sais quoi. Like people use different terms for it. But like when you see the way some things are done and how efficiently they're done, how well they're done, and just how easily they do against top competition, there's an artistic aspect to that, right? And a lot of the things with Jogo Bonito in Brazil and actually Africa, they play with a lot of flair, right? Like it's a different aspect to these sports that are definitely more creative and artistic. And if you really want to get into it, there's like the Pana tournaments, there's like the freestylers, and those are straight up artistic endeavors that involves a lot of technique and a lot of what you're talking about, physical literacy and whatnot. So I would say that, with a lot of the physical and sports like, disciplines, and activities, whatever you want to describe them as, there can be, and often there is, an artistic component and creative component that a lot of people like you might not think of it directly as that, but I would say that when you do think of it like that, you could actually expand more on what you're doing, right?
I suppose the reason why I didn't think of it as creative initially is because a lot of times you're trying to learn a specific skill. When you're trying to learn a specific skill with that certain goal in mind, it's it might not seem creative. I mean, you can go about it creatively and try to figure out new ways of learning stuff. But when you're set on learning a certain specific skill, it doesn't seem as creative. When you're trying to put it all together in a line, make it look nice, or try to modify a skill, that's when the creative aspect comes in.
That's very interesting because at Georgi, I'm sure in art, and especially with like the digital stuff, there's a lot of technique and there's a lot of skill that you just got to learn, right? So wouldn't that be kind of the same thing? But yet it's clearly very artistic. Nice Lorenzo.
Amen. There's a wake up check on it where like it checks it over your way. It gives you like a minute and a half to answer it, but I had my phone face down on the table, so I didn't hear it vibrate.
It's all good.
So remind me.
George, was that...
I'm gonna just hold my phone.
I was just asking you, like, isn't there a lot of techniques and skills you got to learn, but yet it's still a very clearly, artistic endeavor?
Right. Yeah. There are the basics, I guess, the foundational side of that as well, which I guess would be the same as the
parkour thing?
Yeah. Just those. Yeah. The things the rules you need to learn so you can break them.
Yeah. Also, like it's like the basics to a language. If you want to actually speak and use it and communicate, articulate your thoughts, you gotta know the basics, right? This is kind of almost a next level, a natural tie-in to our discussion on the fundamentals when we're talking about knowledge, right? Because obviously now we're talking about kind of the fundamentals and the basics and foundation again, but now we're talking about how, yes, those are important for you to get to the high level, but knowing what the high level looks like and understanding it is what actually allows you to improve even more on the fundamentals and get to that level, right? So we're adding an extra chapter to that story and building up the perspective even more, I would say, which I think is very interesting because that's not something, two ideas that I've both have thought about before, but never quite tied them together. Pretty cool.
It's all connected, man. It's all connected.
It's all connected. It's a matrix resurrected. Gonna watch that movie?
Maybe. I mean, I'll wait for the trailers.
No, okay. There's been like a trailer out already. I don't know how detailed it is, though. Yeah,
it looks pretty good.
It does look pretty good.
I'll think again. Oh, okay. Yeah. It looks pretty good then. I think so.
Yeah, but one thing I wanted to bring up, and it's part of the last thing I want to bring up, is this criticism I've had of the film industry for quite a while, I guess. And some people may know this. I guess, some people might know this. Is that I feel like nowadays so much of the acting is based on realism, right? That's kind of the main thing people focus on. Mm-hmm. And for me, it just feels like looking at, not just theater, but older movies and more, what do they call it? Art house movies or whatever. Like there are other ways to tell a story and convey a message and to really just showcase that idea really, really well. There are other ways to really get you to connect with a character and see their experience. And there are so many ways of performing in acting and film that are actually very effective and interesting and make great entertainment, as well as just, the most important aspect, tell the story. So I really criticize the focus on realism. I feel like there is a place for the stuff that Nicolas Cage was doing in some of his more, dramatic, methods. I think there's a room for more of the old school Hollywood stuff with exaggerated movements and facial expression that's closer to theater, right? And I think there's even a place for like having mid-Atlantic accent just being used instead of more, accurate accents. Because when you're going to a film, it's about the story, it's about that whole experience, and realism is only one way of depiction, of one way of telling that story. And I just feel like, there's got to be more creativity and less of being stuck to one thing, right? And there's just other things that have been done in the past that have been done in more experimental things that I think are very interesting, creative, and it's just kind of sad that I don't get to see them in major movies. I don't get to see them more often and see more, I guess, elite and well-known actors and actresses that goes about it that way. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that aspect. It's just more something I think about when I watch a lot of current movies.
I feel like because it's on a TV, we kind of have this disconnect. So then we feel like it is real in a way. So then to see something that is a bit more expressive, it just seems fake. You know what?
Okay.
Like with Nicolas Cage, like he does, like there's a lot of ridicule, right? There's everyone just expects, and I guess everyone has an expectation. So then they're like, what is this? This is bad acting. It's like, it's not. One funny thing is in Japan, when I was in Japan for a bit, I don't know, I think it's because their shows are based off like manga or light novels. The acting is very expressive, and it's kind of weird. Like for me, I didn't like it because I was expecting something more realistic. So it's a hard, I don't know. It's a interesting.
I feel like it's just kind of like the general. I guess the film culture is a way to put it. It's just kind of built around realism. A lot of that I think has to do with the types of movies that we're into.
Yeah.
So like a lot of the more serious movies, so like a horror movie or an action movie that contemporary audiences would be into. I feel like would be hindered by that more expressive acting, just because the suspension of disbelief would be completely shattered when you see that kind of bad acting in those contexts. In other movies, I think it would be passable. Like maybe some Nick Cage movies, why not?
Yeah.
But then I feel like it's just become so prevalent that, like Georgie was talking about, I don't think it's just Georgie. I think that everybody or a lot of people would have those same expectations.
So the market just you think the market just isn't gonna buy into it if it's been done. So like I think
it's not even that it's been done. I feel like it's just the way that it's progressed. It's just what audiences are into nowadays. You know what I mean? It's not people are gonna look at that and say that, oh, it's old. I don't think the issue with it is that it's been done before. I think the issue is
no. I'm saying like people will have a problem if it's like if they're doing that now. Like the market isn't like I think you misunderstood part of. I wasn't making I wasn't saying the reasons because it's old. I was just saying like people wouldn't buy into it if it's like if they're doing that now.
Not
like for whatever reason. But like the thing I wanted to kind of bring up with this is actually like some of my favorite films. Like one of them now is like The Suicide Squad, and that one was very stylistic, and a lot of people like really loved it, and not just me, right? The most recent one that James Gunn directed with John Cena and like. Margot Robbie. Yeah, yes, ice cream. But yeah, like that one is, I would not say that's realistic at all, right? But at the same time, it's a comic movie, right?
Yeah.
Like you could get away with that a lot more, even though that what they try to do with a lot of Marvel films, especially other DC films, they don't necessarily go with that type of acting, right? They don't really have characters who are exaggerated and very, I don't know, like John Cena's character. Like people don't act like that. Like that's not realistic at all. Even for a character like that, like people wouldn't necessarily expect to be that exaggerated and I guess comical straight up. And obviously, a lot of the scenes, especially the Harley Quinn scene in that island. When she was fighting all those breaking out of the cell, the stylistic aspect to that was just brilliant. I love how it's all flowery and stuff, but the scene's actually so violent as well. Like the whole thing was like not realistic at all. It wasn't like other comic movies either. Like it was kind of its own thing. And also I would say like some of people's favorite films is the Tarantino movies, right? And with all of them, there's a lot of dialogues, a lot of acting, and just scenes where people aren't being realistic at all. Like people don't actually talk like that. It's very interesting. People wouldn't necessarily just go off and do something like that. It's absolutely crazy, right? But people love it. Like there are other ways to tell these stories and make it work, right? So yes, you have something that's like a comic movie, and yes, some of the Tarantino movies are like his version of making westerns, or because he plays with a lot of film genres, right? That's kind of what he does. Yeah. He makes his own version of it and his own take of it and makes it really interesting. But I'm just saying, like, there are movies, even recently, that have been done in a very different way that isn't so focused on realism, that have turned out really well. I would just like to see more people try and be creative and have other ways. Maybe because you could be unrealistic in many ways. You could perform in many ways. I just think there are some options out there that could be very effective in telling the story and making a entertaining spectacle that movies often are for people, right? You go there to see the story and you go there to kind of watch the show. Like those are kind of the two main things, right? And a lot of times they're very interconnected. So that is kind of my criticism for the film industry. But I do understand your point of how kind of the market, like that's not what they expect. That's not where it is right now, because what it was before and now, there's definitely a shift, and it was, I would say, at least somewhat gradual, and it made sense. I'm just saying, I feel like it's gone a bit too much into this and a bit too stuck to it. That's my criticism.
Yeah, I just feel like with the two examples, like for example, the Suicide Squad one, that one is very different from most other movies. So that's a movie that actually I think lends itself quite well to not being too serious. I feel like a lot of the criticisms for some of the more low quality superhero movies recently is that they almost take themselves too seriously. They try to be really serious, or they ham fist something else in there, and it doesn't really work out. Versus, for example, The Dark Knight that Christopher Nolan did. That one, it's a Batman movie, but it's one of the best action movies of all time. And as an action movie, that serious tone fits it really well. And ever since then, a lot of other superhero movies try to follow suit and try to be serious, like Man of Steel from 2013. Zack Snyder, very serious tone. Batman v Superman. God damn, that was so disappointing.
I did not watch that.
Yeah, you didn't miss out on too much. There was some good stuff in there, but god damn, come on, please, why? God, why? But then you end up looking at like the first version of Justice League that got released, where they try to do a 180 a little bit, and it's just not. It did not fly. It did not go well. They just didn't execute it the right way, and I feel like that's one of the tricky things about not making it realistic, is that it's tricky to do that execution. You know, Tarantino has a specific style. When you go watch a Tarantino movie, he's got a specific style. Like even just with the camera movement, just the camera movement alone, sometimes you see something and be like, yeah, that's Tarantino, you know.
Once again, having your own personal voice in whatever creative endeavor, it's a huge thing, man.
Yeah, Tarantino, what a genius.
Holy.
But people come in expecting a Tarantino movie, you know. They don't come in expecting if they came into a Tarantino movie and they got another half decent action film, they'd probably be so disappointed, man. Tarantino makes masterpieces. It's just trickier to make them without the realism with a lot of genres and a lot of stories. A lot of stories lend themselves better to being realistic. And I feel like with theater and a lot of the early Hollywood stuff too, that it's quite interesting because it was kind of uncharted territories. It was still kind of like the Wild West of Hollywood, I suppose.
Yeah.
They were trying out new things, figuring out what worked, what didn't work, and it worked in a way that I think I quite like because it does get the emotion across a certain way. It helps get the message across a certain way in certain contexts. But I feel like he ended up with a lot of the more serious movies that ended up being really big. Like he ended up with like I don't know, like The Godfather. A lot of like those movies from like the 80s. I feel like that's when a lot of movies took a slightly more serious tone, and then from there, they were the most successful movies, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, you know, movie studios just are more likely to fund that stuff. If those were the biggest movies of the time, that's where people are probably going to be more likely to try to imitate when they grow up and they become film directors and whatnot. So
yeah.
I think it's almost a slightly natural progression. But
It's definitely natural.
I'd like to see, I'd like to see
definitely natural.
More expression, less realism sometimes.
Well, I would say that like in other forms of like shows in general, we have seen stuff that are more creative and less kind of well, like one of my favorite shows, like potentially my favorite show of all time, is BoJack Horseman. And like that show was absolutely brilliant. They tackled a lot of very interesting issues, relevant issues, and the storylines and a lot of the characters is really well designed, and you see the character development, and so much of it is just absolutely brilliant. But with the way they did the animations and kind of the metaphors, symbolism, and all of that, like they made it so, I guess, goofy even. Like I don't know if that would be the best word to describe it, but I guess some people could describe it that way because, you know, you're talking about talking animals with humanoid kind of figures. That's cartoon and everything. It's just a wild world, and all these characters should display traits from like the animal that they are. Like it's very interesting. But a lot of stuff they're able to tackle because they use that kind of less serious tone, and it is kind of a comical show, even though it gets very serious at times. Like they're able to go really serious and do a lot of things with it that makes it incredible by not being like a more traditional and serious show. But at the same time, I guess in the cartoon genre, that's definitely being a shift. And a lot of people are trying to do that, and a lot of people are failing. So what you're saying about it harder to execute when you're trying to do something like that is absolutely true. Because yeah, I would say it. But, you know, it's hard to be actually creative and good, you know, like that.
It is, yeah.
Like it's a challenge. You gotta take some kind of courage and kind of really just, hey, I'm gonna step out and do something new and try to be creative and be original in some kind of way, right? Yeah.
100%.
Any thoughts, anyone? No? Yeah, if not, I think we'll talk about a lot of very interesting things regarding creativity, both us and various mediums, actually. I think we talk about a lot of different mediums of creativity.
Yes, sir. This is a big one.
Yeah, this is a big one. It's thanks for coming on, Georgie. You provided some very interesting insights and asked some very, very good questions, I gotta say. We've had guests and we've talked about some interesting things with them, but I don't think anyone has asked as, Good question. I didn't want to use that word, but I couldn't think of any other more accurate words right now.
Yeah.
But you asked some really good questions. And we're gonna end the episode with a segment of highlights of the week, and anyone could start.
Oh,
Anyone? Raymond, how about you?
Yeah, it do be chilling though. That's all I gotta say. You know, week, pretty nice, pretty chill.
Nice.
Yeah, man, just enjoying my time. You know, yeah,
Yes, sir.
that's pretty much it.
It's always nice to be chill, man.
Yeah, man. What about you guys? Any highlights?
Huh.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
Pretty
no.
chill.
Pretty chill.
Oh,
Pretty chill.
Halo
Yeah, honestly,
Infinite.
more chill.
Halo Infinite. Let's go,
oh,
baby.
even
Yes, sir.
Is it coming out?
It's out, man.
Oh, true.
It's free, man. Come on, hop on, Raymond. Hop on.
Is it?
Yeah,
For
it's
how
free.
long?
And it's free to play.
bless you.
All together?
No, and just the multiplayer. You got, yeah,
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, that's pretty high.
yeah, hype.
Great highlight.
Big
Yeah.
highlight, dude.
Yeah.
It's Halo Infinite, man. It's Halo Infinite.
Yeah, man, I'm down.
I've never played Halo, man.
Dude, you should hop on. You should hop on.
Yes, sir.
Well, what about you, Georgie? What's a highlight?
Highlight. It's been a pretty a normal week. Yeah, nothing bad happening, so that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, sometimes just
Hey.
that kind of stability is nice,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing else. I don't think. Nothing that stands out.
Cool.
What about you?
Highlight for me, man, it's hard. It's hard to say. I would say that I did a presentation and I handed in the written summary as well for one of the classes this week, and so that's the other thing done. So and also a thing, the topics for one of the finals essay came out, so it's like you could see the end in sight kind of thing. Like you're getting more stuff done, and the final stuff that you kind of have to do, you're kind of having a good idea what it's gonna be. So I guess the highlight for me is just that it feels like it's getting closer and closer to the end, and I definitely feel like I'm pretty done with school. So seeing it getting closer and closer to the end is a very nice thing. So yeah, I guess that has to be the highlight. It also means I will get a bit more busy, but at the same time, I don't think I'm going to get that much more busy. I feel like it's a couple weeks for the midterms that was really, really busy. So yeah, good to see that's coming to an end, and good to see that I'm not going to be super busy. And this week itself is relatively chill. And having you on as a guest, a very big highlight.
Yeah, big highlight.
Yes, sir.
Big highlight.
Yes, sir.
And on that note, it's going to be the end of our episode this week on creativity. And we'll see you guys again next week. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.